Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new Summon Experience. I'm Brent Cook. I'm the Director of Product Management for Summon, and today we'll be reviewing our refreshed user interface with optimized usability. We've got a lot to go over today, so as Scott mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, please be sure to submit any questions. We'd love to dive in and answer anything you've got. But today what we'll start off with is we'll take a look back at where we come from as a reminder of how much Summon has changed over the years. We'll take some time to dive into the new Summon experience, tell you how we figured out the areas to focus on, what we did around user testing, and then the key areas for improvement and our findings around those areas. Next, we'll move into the preview feedback. We can take a look at all the list of things that you've given us feedback on so far, how we've categorized those issues, and I can give you a brief status of where they are and what to expect. And then we'll talk about the next steps, what's going to happen in the preview environment and what you'll see there, what to expect when the December release goes live on December 15th, and then what will happen thereafter. And then we'll finish up with a reminder about HTTPS support for the user interface. And again, we'll stop for your questions. So please submit any that you'd like to hear answered, and I'll do my best to answer them. Excuse me. So let's start off and take a look back at where we've come from. It's hard to believe it's been since 2009 when we first introduced Summon. Fairly straightforward user interface at that time. The preview popped up when you hovered over the title. You had your checkboxes next to your refine your search area there on the left, and a variety of other things. They looked great for 2009, and we were really excited to launch it at that time. In 2013, we entered the era of Summon 2.0. We added a lot new functionality. You can see the facets there starting to take sort of their more modern look that they have today. There's a lot more functionality and cleanness in the overall results, but we've still got some work to grow and expand there. There was a lot of good things that came out in that upgrade to Summon 2.0. Topic Explorer was a nice feature at that time, and a variety of other things. In 2016, we took that user interface and we brought it up to the most recent version, a lot of what you've seen recently. The initial release of that in 2016, we saw the introduction of some improvements to the facet pane, including the addition of the Exclude functionality that you can see there on the left-hand side. We also added a new toolbar that we'd eventually expand on, but at the beginning it started off with the ability to cite and save or email a variety of things and a few other actions that you could do there as part of each brief result. And there was a preset date range added for date pickers. So not only do we polish the user interface in 2016, we added some good functionality as well. In the remaining years between now and then, we added a lot of features. We've added, as you can see now, if you go back and forth from that last screen, that brief results has got a lot more information in it. We added the peer review indicator and the open access indicator. We added a direct link to PDFs via unpaywall. We added citation trail. We added BX recommender. Improved the integration of things like Web of Science, and we added alt metrics. Just overall, there's been a lot of work between 2016 and last year to improve Summon and add a lot of functionality. So that brings us to the new Summon experience, which the goal there was to take all that great functionality that had been added, organize it better on the page, and improve the way that the users could interact with the results set and find exactly what they're looking for. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Today, we'll talk about the new Summon experience, and I'd like to talk first a little bit about how we used feedback and user testing to identify the various key areas for improvements and show you just how we came about developing the new Summon experience. So how do we determine our focused areas? We started this project at the beginning of the year by using a variety of inputs from you and your patrons to determine that initial scope for testing and improvements. The inputs we used included your contributions to idea exchange. We looked at what are the ideas that came in through there, as well as the importance of those. We took a look at support tickets, any feedback that you've given us directly, or any trouble tickets that we've seen or issues that we've seen that have been recurring. We identified those as possible areas to work on. We did a variety of accessibility testing. And throughout this presentation, something to note is that we do accessibility testing before we do the changes to see how things are working. We make changes based on the testing that we did, and then the changes that we made, we tested again. to make sure that we are as compliant and accessible as possible. The most important thing is making sure everyone can access and use Summon in the ways they need to. We also take a look at use of statistics. And then finally, any direct feedback from you or your patrons. So if you emailed us, if you filled out a form, again, if you provided feedback via support, and took a look at that and said, what's the best way that we can improve Summon? A few areas we identified early on was the use of facets, including interactions with a More Facet Pane. That overall brief results, as I mentioned, we saw a lot of various good information come and be added to that brief results, but I could use a little bit of organization work. And then finally, access to content, both physical and electronic. Getting to that end content, clicking on that link that takes you to the full text or to request the physical item is critical to the user's journey. And so we wanted to take a look at that as well. And again, all areas must meet accessibility requirements, so that was a baseline for everything. So I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about our methods and purposes and how we went about doing our initial using. So we identified these various sections that we want to focus in on, and then we took them through this approach, which is take some time to learn the current state, see how people did their research and how they use Summon. This may do a lot of validating what we already know, but it can also take a look at what are the things that they do and how they do them. And then while they're doing those activities, identify the needs and opportunities. What is it they're missing, or what are they challenged with when they're interacting with the user interface? And I'll go into some more details about exactly how we did that. The next thing is the design solutions based on known needs. So we'll take the input that you have from that initial round of talking to users and come up with a design. And then finally, circle back and do some user testing to make sure that the designs that we did actually work. Now here's the details on what that means. So the first thing we did was learn the current state and identify various needs. So we recruited a variety of folks to interview. It came down to about 8 some user interviews that we did while they interacted with Summon. The way the interviews worked, one person would be the moderator and have a conversation and interact with the user, with a couple of people observing, taking notes, and of course recording so we can learn from their interactions. We asked them to evaluate specific tasks using Summon. So we asked them to use the Exclude filter, which required them to use the More Facet Pane and interact there. And we also asked them to bulk email a variety of citations to themselves, which would require them to interact with the brief result and the saved items folder. And we learned a lot of great things from that. Of the 8 people that we worked with, you can see some information there about them on the screen. 7 were currently enrolled in academic programs, ranging from undergraduate to postgraduate work, and 1 web services librarian. So the variety of experience of these folks range from people who were just starting to use Summon to those who knew it well enough to teach it. So what were our overall findings? As I mentioned, some of the things validated what we knew, and we learned some new things as well. First off, users don't spend much time learning the tool. If we ask them something to do, they would just dive in and start doing it, whether it was something that they'd been asked to do before or not. They pretty much focused on things what they're used to or what they've been taught. Some of the undergraduates talked about how their instructor told them that they needed a peer-reviewed journal article from specific types or specific journals, and those individuals would go straight to the facets and select those things right off. Others had habits they had around usage of keywords or other features in the user interface. And again, most of them talked about, we have them speak their thoughts as they're going through the process. And a lot of them talked about how this is how they were shown to use Summon, so therefore they use it that way. So that's great news on the instruction you give them. But again, they fall into patterns, and asking them to do things could be a bit of a challenge. A common focus for all of our study participants were looking for recent sources, sources related to specific disciplines, making sure that the sources were reputable, making sure they were peer-reviewed or journals, and then looking for full text. Each talked about, when we asked them about their process, about how they find that full text quickly and get the information they need in order to complete their assignment. For some of them, they were also interested in the length or size of the text they were reading to know how manageable it will be for their workload. When we asked them to identify different things using the brief results, finding the indicators could be challenging. They would know where one or two of the indicators might be. They might know peer-reviewed or they might know open access. But because the various indicators were spread throughout the result, it could take them some time to identify various components or various aspects of the content that we asked them about. And then finally, that exclude functionality in the More Facet Pane was not easily discoverable or used. The majority of folks that we asked to use it were, if not all of them, were unfamiliar with the ability to go to the More pane and exclude items. And then when we coached them and helped them find that bit of information, even the interactions with the More Facet Pane were challenging for them, which is where a lot of the various designs came from. So what was the result? We took a look at all the feedback we got and we identified these 4 key aspects to work on. The first is stylistic updates, basically giving the whole thing a fresh coat of paint just to make it look a little newer and nicer. Facet improvements, as I mentioned, we identified a lot of various areas that we can work on there. Brief results display improvements, again, those indicators could be organized a little bit better than what we had. And the display of links and the access to that full text or request information for physical items. And I'll talk a little bit about those various focus areas, but before we do that, I just want to take a moment and remind you, this is what we have today in production, and in a few weeks, we will have this, which again, a lot of similarities between the current user interface and this new user interface, but with some nice changes that make it look more modern, easier to use, and easier to interact with. So let's take a look at what that means. So one of the challenges and goals we had was to unify those indicators, make it easy for folks to see at a glance all the information that they're looking for. The users need to identify what materials are relevant for their search and their work. And the challenge is, how do we display all of that information to simplify scanning and relevant materials? As hopefully you could see in that sort of time capsule from when Summon started back in 2009 to today, there's a lot more information packed into that brief result. Now all of those indicators such as peer-reviewed, original research, page number, and such are displayed together on the upper right-hand side for a consistent location and easy to glance at to see what's there. The number of pages give users an idea about time investment. And so folks like that, if you don't have that turned on, I'd recommend you activating it in your instance of Summon. And again, overall, it's much easier to glance and see if this result meets your requirements. The next design challenge and goal is full text controls. How do we get users to the full text easily? Now, something I've said before in webinars is that the user's end goal isn't really about the search results, it's about that final text. And so how do we get them there? How do we provide a clear path to get to that full text? The new design puts a single primary control to get the text or PDF. There's PDF icons to make it easy to see. Other paths are presented as secondary options so that that first link for some reason doesn't work, or the first available item from a physical item isn't the one that you need or is out. You can always go to a secondary one. Before, there were multiple paths to that full text. So rather than having just one spot to look for a link to full text, for example, you could have additional text injected into the results. You could also have on paywall, and then of course you have the primary link as well. Now that's all consistently condensed into a single button. Another challenge was being able to show physical items availability. So along with getting folks that full text as quickly as possible, we also knew that it was important for physical items to see if that book's available and see all the various locations where it might be available. The challenge with that is, how do you do that in a way that's quick and easy to see? Again, one of the challenges is it's a lot of great information. You want to display it as quickly as possible, but you want to make sure that you don't overwhelm the user with too much information, which is a balance we struggle to maintain at all times. So what does the new design look like? Our initial response to this was a single primary control to request items, and again, the ability to follow other paths during secondary options. Before, you had a single link with text, and even the users who were familiar, it could take them a little bit of time to find it if there was a lot of information in that brief result. So that button now in a single location will hopefully highlight exactly what it is that you see there. We also, as I mentioned, saw a lot of area for improvement in the filters and exclude functionality. The user need is to eliminate materials that don't match research needs. When we showed users this particular functionality and when they used it, they were those that were familiar were glad of the reminder. Those who had never seen it before were excited to know that they could help focus their results a little bit more using that exclude functionality. We also wanted to make sure that all that information that's provided in the More user pane, which a lot of people were unaware of, or even if they went to the More user pane, they sometimes had challenges around interacting with it, forgetting to click the apply button, or having challenges scrolling through things. So the new design brings all that information forward. It's now in the primary pane. The exclude options are displayed directly for the facet without having to go to another panel, and everything is searchable from the initial facet. You can sort it. It's much easier to find and interact with those facets if you like. Again, previously, many options were only available only via the More pane, and also you only got the additional information, the specific facet that you selected, rather than having it all available in the primary pane like you can see today in the new user interface. So we went through that interview with the various folks that we worked on. We identified our challenges. We started the design work. We completed the design for the initial pieces, and then we took those prototypes and we tested those with users prior to development and preview. So before what you saw pushed to preview a couple of weeks ago, we actually took that and we did unmoderated user studies using userzoom.com to validate designs. We would present the various elements individually to have participants interact with it. Depending on the amount of response we got, we had around 6 to 9 participants for each review. There was about a 2-to-1 ratio of undergraduates to graduates in the interactions with this testing. The areas of study for our participants included a variety of disciplines: nursing, economics, journalism, history, science, business administration, technology management, computer science, education, and computer engineering. So it was from a variety of disciplines and with a variety of probably comfort levels and working with someone. And the participations interacted, as I mentioned, with a prototype. So at this point, it was really just to validate that our design choices made sense. So what was the result of all that? Well, we've executed the design. We did have to make a few tweaks required due to development needs, but we basically were able to deliver on the prototypes that we tested with these users. Tested the release internally using all of our standard quality assurance testing and making sure that the functionality is behaving. And we deployed that to preview, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and now you've provided your feedback on that iteration of the preview release. So that brings us to where we are today with the preview feedback, and I will provide a current status on issues and let you know what those issues are and where we go next. So first off, I want to say thanks to everyone for your feedback. All the feedback you've given is important, and I just want to preface what I'm about to say to let you know that the prioritization that I talk about here and the timing that I talk about for all the various improvements and fixes that we've talked about or that we've identified in the preview environment, all of them are important, and we take them all seriously. We talk about prioritization, and timing is only an acknowledgement of the capacity and the required level of effort it takes to deliver these improvements. So we want to get to everything as quickly as possible, and because of the nature of time and development, we will have to do things in a phased approach, and I'll cover what that means in just a moment. So again, the following is provided for guidance and isn't a comprehensive list of all open items. I will list as many as I possibly can, but as you'll see, this is a fairly full hour already. The focus is on system-wide areas of feedback. So if your issue was reported and we've only been able to identify it as an issue with your specific instance of summon or related to individual customizations that you may have done, I will not be including those specialized cases in this webinar. Those issues are being tracked and addressed, so don't worry, they are being thought about and worked on. But again, the ones I'll talk about here are the ones that impact most, if not all of us. And again, the proposed solutions are dependent on how long it takes to development, what the requirements for development are, and successful testing. So how do we prioritize the issues as they come in? The first area of feedback and improvements that we work on are in this first group, which is that if functionality from the current user interface is not working in the new UI, or if new functionality that we've added is not behaving as designed or working, those items are fixed prior to release. So we make sure we don't break anything if at all possible when we make the improvements, and that all new things are working. The second area of focus is preferred improvements. So things are working as designed and intended, but could use some improvements. We'll fix as many of these items as we can prior to release. The benefit and implementation possibilities of some may need review. So this is starting to get into the area of features where it's good feedback, and how we might take that feedback and apply it may have different options or may have different impacts. We need to weigh those out and develop accordingly. There may be some alternative workarounds for this area or options for customization. So a great example of sort of how things fall here is that if you have an element that is added and has a new label, and everyone is unsure of what the default should be, the unpaywall link that we launched a couple years ago is a great example of that. When we launched that product, or when we launched that feature, there was a large discussion on the listserv about what the default text should be. We had it just simply as PDF. A lot of people felt that that was confusing or not enough information, and we had a great conversation about what would be a good default text to change there. That, however, would fall into the number 2 preferred improvements, because even if we decided not to change the default text from PDF, you would have the ability to go into the translations chat tab and adjust that if at all possible. Of course, we want to have the default be as useful to everyone as we possibly can. And again, when we're taking a look at focus of things to fix, if there's a workaround like that, or if it's a preference, that would fall into the second bucket. And alternatively, as I said, we'll try to fix these for the December release or improve them if they make sense, but they might be deferred to a later release if they are not that critical. And then the final area is additional functionality or configurations for working features. So you may have identified some great improvements or changes to how the functionality works, and the functionality still works as it is and is still beneficial overall. It just needs some improvements. That's the kind of thing that would fall into this third group. And I'm going to take a moment just to focus in on the green dot, indicating both availability for books and for online text, just to give you an idea of how we go through looking at these, how it came to be, and then what are the next steps that we take on addressing this. If you take a look in the upper left-hand corner, you see that online orange banner. That right there was the previous indicator if text was online and it was full text and you could easily access it. We noticed that a lot of users sort of tuned that out, didn't notice the orange banner, even though it was a bright orange and hopefully catching their attention. Then we found that a green dot would work better to indicate for availability of that. So that online orange banner migrated to the right-hand side. You can see there on the second screen grab there, where the online dot is in the upper right-hand corner. At the same time, we were making changes to physical availability, and we added that green dot, the word available next to it. Now, implementing these features, again, we worked on the book piece individually. We worked on the online indicator and moving that individually. When we did testing, we got positive feedback on the use of that green indicator to show availability or the fact that something's online. And when we showed it to you in the preview environment, we got a lot of great feedback. One of which is it's confusing to have those green dots in different areas and have it be inconsistent for online versus physical. Also the word available, that doesn't show enough information. While there's information available on a hover, call numbers and things like that would work better than that information. So we took a look at all that feedback and we were able to identify things like the communication of the call number, and that is a high priority item that would fall into group 1 and something we want to address because we are losing some functionality there. We are losing some communication to the end user, especially in mobile areas. We don't want to do that. So that would fall into that first area. The green dots, those are functioning as designed. While it may be slightly confusing for the user, it won't prevent them from using the functionality. We want to see it consistent, and we want to do it before the release is done. And if it comes to us choosing between doing a high priority item or adding more things like changing the location of the green dot, we'll do the green dot as quickly as we possibly can. So that may come out in February. So that's how we go through that process of looking at these. The final thing that I'll note is that even if something is in the second or third category there, again, we start focusing on the number one items first, the things that are critical, broken, or must be addressed before we go live. While we're in there working, if we're working in the same area of code that includes these things that fall into the second or third bucket, we'll address those as well. So you'll find things that I do describe as being in the second or third bucket, getting in there rather quickly. And again, that can be due to what we're working on and how well that fits into the current development. So I'd like to take a moment to talk a little bit about what you've reported so far, where those fall into this various bit of prioritization, and what the status is and what that might look like when it shows today. So the issues that fall into the first category are things like the performance issues. A couple weeks ago, people were reporting that it was taking some time for the pages to load and that availability wasn't showing up because it was taking so long, it was timing out. So that obviously is something we want to address. Some of that sluggishness may be due to the fact that it is the preview environment and not production. And with all the ways we change the user interface, with the order in which things load, it's important for us to look at this performance issue and see if we can improve it. So that's top of our list. Same as I mentioned for that availability of physical items and call numbers, the fact that those aren't displaying, or if you change the text or if the text was particularly long, the size of the button wouldn't adjust to match that. So those are critical things to fix. Full text online was displaying for records that aren't full text. A lot of you have stack map integrations, and the way that we did the brief results was interfering with that. There were a lot of duplicates showing up in the all links functionality. So when you clicked on that more option to see more, every link appeared twice. And then finally, the database recommender improvements, the CSV file for that. A lot of you tried downloading it and found out that that was empty. So I know that's a lot to cover. So let's take a moment and excuse me, give us a little bit more room here. This is what things look like today. As I mentioned, we've got indicators in a variety of places, a variety of links with our new user interface. Much cleaner. So something to note, the areas that I was talking about that are critical. So the performance issues, as you can see, that loaded rather quickly. Hopefully we've done some work there. We'll continue to work on that. Availability for physical items and call numbers. Let's take a moment to flip over. I'm going to go to some of the various sites that provided feedback and show you what we've done there. Actually, let me go to physical books. Let's take a look at their library catalog here. As you can see now, we've already made some changes. You can now see the availability there. That shows up in that. Stack map integrations. I do believe I've got one up here that has some stack map integrations. Excuse me. If we take a look at this site right here, I do believe that this has a variety of buttons integrated as well. Yes, here you can see browsing is included. I don't have a stack map link here, but folks who have stack map, actually, I think that last one, the button is showing. This one right here, yes, this right here goes to a stack map integration, so that's right there. All links, the duplicate links, you can now go and see that it is a unique link in each one. And then finally, the last thing I touched on there was the database recommender showing a blank file. If you navigate to settings, recommender, databases, you have this link up here that will show you the CSV. Hopefully my login is still valid and I won't get a timeout. There we go. I clicked on the button. I can open that spreadsheet and roll of the dice. Yes, there it is, populated, no longer a blank spreadsheet. Something to note about all of this that I'm showing you right now, all of these preview of changes. If you're wondering when you're going to be able to see all of this information, hopefully this won't send you running from this webinar window to a browser, but this is all live in the preview environment. So these changes, a lot of the changes, if not all, are in the preview environment for you to be able to look at and provide more feedback, because there may be some more tweaks or improvements that are required. For example, when we did the implementation, as you can see here with my example, my apologies, with the book piece, the button isn't showing up at this time. We will work on that element, but again, that isn't as critical as getting that information out there. So we'll work on the formatting of the button, but please take a look out there and see what you think of those changes we've made so far. So that's the top level items that we want to address. And as I just showed you, most of those are addressed, if not all of them, in the preview environment now. What are the things that fall into the second bucket? And this is one of the larger buckets that we have. As I mentioned, we're going to do everything we can to try to get this fixed as quickly as possible. There's an overlap in bookmark, chat, and hamburger information, a variety of changes for colors of links. Let me just go ahead and swap over to the browser in just a moment. When this is made available, you'll have this long list, but it's a lot more fun to take a look at how things actually work in the user interface. Here's an example where we have some issues with the saved items, the chat icon being used on this site and the menu. Those were overlapping when you went to a smaller browser. If you take and you reduce the size of it now, you'll see there's good spacing around those, and that spacing has been addressed. There's some issues around folks saying that in smaller windows and smaller browser sizes, this brief result, the result set itself, gets constrained where you can't really read it. It gets too narrow, and that's partially due to the new required wider width of this facet pane. In order to bring all this functionality forward, it's a little bit wider than what we have currently and doesn't collapse the same, which is the biggest change. At a default size, fully expanded, they're the exact same size. But when you start to collapse, this facet pane can't collapse as much as the other one, which can make it difficult to read these pieces, especially if you go to a smaller size. We've addressed that by adding this little element here. You can click on that to hide the filters. If you're in a smaller browser size, again, you can reduce the size of it there. You still have a lot of really good information. As you can see, part of your mobile functionality kicks in as well. But if you're in a smaller screen, you can hide those filters and then easily expand them as well. There has been some feedback as well on the various link colors that we have, the icons in the toolbar there. Again, some of the links in availability, some of the links in the site, those colors don't match up. I don't know that we've been able to address all of those or make them configurable. Those would be items that we would defer to February if we can't get them done in December. Of course, we want all the colors to work and work well, good. Also, I should mention that there are elements such as this little arrow. When you start to do things like exclude or provide limits to print books, those various elements, the indicator that you have one exclude there, the exclude itself and the background color for that hover, the new facets sort of navigator that you have at the top, it tells you what you've done. All of those colors, you put in requests to be able to customize those because they currently don't have controls and they may not match your default colors. Again, it's critical for us to make those changes. We know it's important for your color schemes and to match within your university's brand guidelines and overall websites. So we know it's important to change those. And those are some of the final details that may be delayed to a maintenance release or to the February release if we can't get them addressed today. Another thing I want to point out, I searched on the word heart attack for a reason. That was to be able to show what people were discussing on the listserv a week or so ago. This part that I've highlighted is known as query expansion. That was showing up in the right-hand side, crowding that sort option that you have there. It's now better formatted and matches the font size and everything else for the page there. So that's in there as well. Displaying the location value and displaying information there has been fixed, I do believe. There are some other color issues, PDF buttons being different colors, the search box, when you start to collapse down the size, we've gotten feedback that that's too short, that when you type in a longer search, it makes it difficult to see. Those are bits of functionality that we're looking at fixing, but may not be in the December release. Making sure that there are translations there for all of the various features. Making sure that external integrations like libkey appear as a link. They currently appear as just text, making those fit better with the new design. What else? I'll switch back over to my list. Again, as many of these as possible. Oh, the number of copies of labels, there's a 5. If you have a number like 5 or copies, there's an X next to it to show number of times. We're going to add that into the translations as well. Peer-reviewed icons shouldn't be plural. I'm happy to say that that is fixed. It actually used to say peer-reviewed articles when reviewing the fact that articles was plural, and it shouldn't be for a single result. We realize that it is possible that something might show up peer-reviewed that's not an article. It also provides better sort of presentation and grouping. So we just dropped the word article, and it now just says peer-reviewed. So again, we'll change as many of these as we can. A lot of these are already in the preview environment, and those that aren't, if we can, there's still the opportunity for them to get added to the December release, and definitely the opportunity to change them in February or in maintenance releases. The final group that I'd like to talk about is additional functionality or configurations for working features. These are things that we'd like to see changed, but as things stand today, they're as designed and they're working. So things like that, the selected facets at the top should be configurable. When we did user testing, the area that we're talking about there is, again, when you do your selections like this facet area up here that's this blue color, there were some institutions that did not want this to appear at the top. When we did user testing, having all of the information for the facets showing at the top versus having to scroll through and find those elements, especially when you have pre-selected facet values when you start your search. A lot of users appreciated having that information at the top to make it clear what facets have been applied. There are some who don't like this though, and you want to turn this off for your site. We are working on making that configurable. However, again, that falls into the bucket of improvements we'd like to see. And again, get that done as quickly as possible. The ability to order your facets and refine your search in the scroll bar. That area, again, I'll switch back over to my piece. This top area, before the update that was pushed into preview in the last 24 hours, the space between these words were larger, and there was a scroll bar here on the right-hand side. And then there's also been a request to reorder these various values in this refine your search area. So again, this is a great example. It's not a primary thing. It was working fine. The scroll bar was unfortunate, but it did function and people could find it if they needed to. So that wouldn't have fallen into the first category. But as you can see from the preview environment here, we've already fixed a lot of those issues. The scroll bar is gone. We've tightened up the layout here so that more appears above the fold or in the browser window when you have a smaller monitor or browser size. So that fixes in there. The ability to order these, we don't have that yet. And that's something that will likely come in a later release. So other things that folks called out, someone mentioned moving the language feature out of the hamburger menu. Currently, if you want to switch the language for the user interface, that's a bit difficult to find. That's something that's been on the ID Exchange, and it is something we have on the list of improvements for the user interface. Didn't make it into these refresh round, but we are looking at continuing improvements in 2022, and that would be definitely something that we would pull into those releases. There was feedback on the expanded availability button, the open button. Folks didn't like the formatting on that. We'll see if we can make some changes there, but again, that's more of a preference than anything. And then we got some feedback on the advanced search pane, on the preview pane, or other existing functionality that we didn't make any modifications for. And some folks were noticing things for the first time on these features that have been there for a while, and it was really good feedback. Having said that, because we haven't made any changes on those pages, those are definitely not our focus for now. The good news is, though, in 2022, we do plan on the roadmap to continue this refresh of the Summon user interface. And next August, for the August release in 2022, we plan to have some more improvements around the advanced search pane, around the catalog detail page, around the preview pane. And I'll give more details exactly what that is in the scope when I do my roadmap webinars in just a few weeks. So what are the next steps? What can you expect from preview and in the upcoming releases? So as I just showed you, there has been an update posted to the preview environment. You can go out now and take a look at a lot of the changes that we've made. I say here that I'll post a notice to the listserv when the update's live. I'll do that shortly. You're getting the news first if you haven't already gone out and noticed it yourself. We'll include as many improvements as possible. As I said, we're focusing on those top priority issues, and I do believe we've got most, if not all of those in there, so please take a look. We will take what you see in preview and push that live on December 15th. It may include some smaller fixes not seen in preview, so there may be a few more of those sort of minor adjustments that we may be able to adjust and get in there. We'll be able to do that. It also will only go live if all major issues are resolved. When we made the changes, we don't think we've introduced anything new, and we think from the past 2.5, 3 weeks of feedback that we've caught all the major issues. But if something did come up between now and December 15th that would fall into that first category and prevent us from launching, we certainly would not launch on December 15th. But as I mentioned so far, things are looking really good for December, and we really appreciate the feedback. So what happens beyond the December release? Any appropriate issues that we didn't get done as part of the December release in this preview environment update, we will address those as soon as possible. Most of those that fall into that category will be included in the February 2022 quarterly release. Some may come in maintenance releases as is needed before and after that. And as I mentioned, we plan for additional changes in 2022. I'll have a firm date on that and more details in the roadmap webinar, but we will include some changes there. So we'll want to make those changes as quickly as possible. But we also know that once this goes out into the wild and your users start to use this, they may identify issues as well. And again, when those issues come in, we'll prioritize them in a similar manner and get them addressed as quickly as possible and appropriate. While we were going through this webinar, hopefully I was able to touch on everything you saw on the slides. I may have missed a bullet or two. Again, we'll make this list available to you after the presentation so that you can review them yourself. As I mentioned earlier, though, I probably didn't mention everything. Some things may have come in after I created this presentation, again, we have a lot of material and something may just not have gotten the focus that you may have thought it needed. If it wasn't mentioned, don't start to worry just yet about it being worked. Did you support a ticket for it via the support center? Then you know that your issue is being tracked and will be addressed and prioritized appropriately. So if you open a support center ticket and you did not see your issue in this PowerPoint, rest assured it is being worked currently. Did you post it only to the listserv, or did you only email it to me directly and it's in my inbox? I've done everything I possibly can to make sure that I've pulled all of the various feedback that you provided on the listserv and directly to me. You know, again, there's a lot of information that's been coming in. I may have missed something. A support ticket would certainly guarantee that that issue is going to be taken up. Someone's going to take a look at that issue. As a reminder on what to do when you're submitting feedback, there's a lot of information here. This is available. I posted it to the listserv, and again, we'll make this available. But the real takeaway from this slide is go to the support portal, submit a case. As long as you select the asset as being summoned, it shouldn't be an issue. And no matter what you put into your ticket, if it's related to the user interface feedback, it will get fast-tracked to be addressed in this release. If you can, in the subject, remember to put preview UI feedback. Feel free to add any more of a description to the subject after that if you'd like. If for some reason you submitted a case and didn't follow these instructions or did something different, don't worry. We're still processing that information and making sure that it's addressed as quickly as possible. So for the HTTPS, the last thing I want to do is remind you of some changes we're making to HTTPS support. Currently, in the production environment, you can opt not to use HTTPS for your site, but that is about to change. As part of this release, we will be changing from that being optional to being forced. All sites beginning December 15th in production that are using the Summon user interface will be redirected to HTTPS URLs. That's required for ongoing system security and make sure that the entire system is secure for you and all the patrons and all the institutions that use Summon. Any existing bookmarks or search widgets, any link that you have that start with HTTP, they'll still work. They'll just be quickly redirected to a secure version of that link. This functionality is already in place in preview. So if you go and take a look in preview, that should show you what your site's going to look like once this happens. The impact, if for some reason there is an issue, shouldn't affect the overall performance of the page. The page will still render. You just may get some warning messages from your browser. So you may get a broken lock in the address bar in your browser, or you may get a dialog box that warns you that you have mixed elements on the page and that some are not secure. So if you've already switched to HTTPS redirect, if you already have that in production, there will be no change. It will go live. The only difference will be the option to turn HTTPS off in the admin console will disappear as of December 15th. If you don't currently have redirects to HTTPS turned on, if you have elements that are not secure on the page, again, you'll get those security warnings. The user can still access the information. They just may get concerned because of the warnings. Please note, if you are developing using the Summon API site, this only applies to the native interface. So if you're not using the Summon user interface, if you've developed your own, this redirect does not apply to you. Things to check for. So take a look in preview and look for things like best bets, custom panels, topic explorer, or other areas where you may have external images or scripts that you may have modified. You want to ensure all those elements are secure, or again, you may get a security warning in your browser. If you want to check this in your live site in production, it's very easy to do with minimal impact to your end users. You can go into the admin console under settings, general. That third item there is force HTTPS via redirect. Just turn that on and save it. Again, if you go into the preview environment, you won't see that control. But if you go into your production environment, you can easily turn that on. Click save. It takes about 5 minutes for that to take effect. So if you really want to see what it looks like in production, you can find a quiet time over the weekend or some other time. Turn that on. See what happens, and then if you'd like, turn it back off. It only takes 5 minutes. It's rather quick, and again, the impact should be maybe a warning message or two from your browser. It still should work fine. Again, the option to turn this on or off will no longer be available after the December release. Thank you so much to everyone for taking an hour out of your day to learn a little bit more about the Summon user interface. I really appreciate the positive feedback that we've gotten and all the feedback for improvements. Hopefully you've seen the impact that you've had directly on the user interface as we've made these changes, and let us know what else we can do to make sure that the December 15th release goes as smoothly as it possibly can. So again, thanks for your time and stay safe out there, and I hope you have a good day.